live stream as well. Yes.
Hi, welcome to our last meeting for this term in the Brazil Center, which has been a lively lineup ranging from looking at Trump's impact on Brazilian politics to indigenous film to important art exhibits at the Fowler. We've had a little bit. There's been something for everyone. Pirjo Vartanen is one of the foremost European analysts of Amazonian indigenous populations. She's the professor of indigenous studies at Helsinki, and she works on topics such as the indigenization of biodiversity, new kinds of temporalities, and basically the ontologies and politics of indigenous populations at what is currently a major front in terms of the regional development in Amazonia. A lot of attention falls on sort of the Mato Grosso and southern Amazonian areas, but the real dynamics and transformations are happening sort of at the further to the west. She also works on research ethics with indigenous populations, which remains a question of considerable importance. She's worked with the Aripuna and the Manqueri Amazonian groups on the response to road building and so on. She looks also more generally at the questions of indigenous sustainabilities, the questions of indigenous politics, indigenous futurities, and research methods. It's important to understand that indigenous is not niche in the politics currently underway throughout Amazonia, and that these are movements that are central to regional transformation in the face of climate change and massive, large-scale forest loss. She has written several books and edited several books. The most recent is The Indigenous Youth in Amazonia, What's the Future? And then also creating dialogues and changes in forms of leadership in Amazonia. She's part of the International Panel on Biodiversity and Development Working Group and is currently a Fulbright scholar at Davis. So we're very lucky to have her here. And without further ado, I think we just go forward with mission.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, Susanna Hecht and Brian Pitts, for the invitation and for organizing this talk. It's just a great honor to be here and to learn about research carried out by UCLA, Latin American and Brazilian Studies. It's really important to get to know different campuses of University of California. So I've been in Davis for the last 9 months. And yeah, it's very, very nice to be here and learn more about your research. But first of all, I'd like to acknowledge my greatest teachers which is the rainforest in southwestern Amazonia and the Purus River Basin. So here is Purus River Basin with its headwaters towards the Andes and then flowing towards Manaus, meeting here in Peruri with other waters. So these have been my greatest teachers, as well as many indigenous knowledge holders, leaders, and especially the Apoliná, Pupukari, and Manchineru nations. I was myself born in Northern Europe, so in the Arctic. And you know that the Arctic and Amazonian ecological systems are among the most vulnerable ones today in the planet. In the Arctic region, we are experiencing the collapse of the extensive ice sheet, not exactly in the place where I live, but in the proximities, and the thawing permafrost. This will accelerate climate change, while in the Amazon, deforestation gradually make it unable to produce rainfall. These changes would be catastrophic for all humanity. We are all related, and what happens in the Arctic affects the Amazon through more droughts and fires. And what happens in the Amazon affects the Arctic through the ocean currents and other forms. But so from this planetary and atmospheric level, I would like to go more to the ground and to Southwestern Amazonia, to the river Purus River Basin, where I've been working. And my research has been community-based. I draw from exchanges, co-thinking, co-acting, co-living, walking and traveling by rivers and land with the community members and indigenous researchers involved in research projects. Ceremonies to which I've been invited, and the rich repertoire and hours of listening and participating in story. It's work done collectively. There are many people involved, including indigenous and non-indigenous researchers, and also my own program, Indigenous Studies at University of Helsinki, where we have Sami scholars and also indigenous scholars from other parts of the world. So we have Sami studies and a global indigenous studies program. And it's been 20 years journey of learning and unlearning. And in this period, I have been able to experience many ecological, economic, and social changes in the area. I work with archaeologists as well, so I like to think in long time spans, but only in this 20 years period that is relatively short, there have been really drastic changes. For instance, here related to the highway, the federal highway PR 317, that is also called Interoceanic Highway, connecting Rio Branco, the state capital of Acre State, to the Pacific and other cities in Brazil. So you can see here in this map the extensive deforestation. In the 2003-2004, when I would travel from Rio Branco to Boca do Acre, I could really see the highway passing through the rainforest. But today it's impossible even to see forests from a car when one is traveling. The impact, deforestation impact of the highway is that overreaching. And so why is it important to talk about this region today? Besides the deforestation and the highways that are present in this area, it's the region where that is hosting extensive construction plans of new roads, namely the extension of the PR 319 highway connecting Manaus to Porto Velho, and its extension roads to Tefe, Coari, the state roads that would connect to the federal road. So this is the area, and this is one of the integral parts of the Amazon. So when the roads are built here, that will definitely have a drastic ecological impact, not regionally, but also at planetary level. Really, we're talking about the atmospheric planetary system. And also, studying this area has been very important for understanding the eco history in this in India Amazon that is very diverse. In Amazonia, there are diverse regions, different ecosystems, different histories. And by understanding the ecological past and present, we are able to extend to biocultural climate futures to come. We can understand better what might be ahead and what kind of ancestors we will be. But so this is the area. I just want to show a map that was an experiment we did showing the mining concessions that we can find in the open data sources and the plans for new roads and this is the context of Apurina territory. So today I will draw more on our collaborative work we have done together with different Apurina communities. But so let's go a little bit to the biocultural pasts and present of this region to situate this talk. So if you're familiar with the literature related to the Amazonian environmental history, I'm sure you have already become very informed about indigenous nations' ecological practices and how deeply they have shaped and affected the formation of tropical forests. I mention here works by Will Ballet related to the anthropogenic forests, Charles Clement on domestication, and many others. Many human ecologists have been working on this topic for a very long time. I really want to recognize that important work. There by anthropologists, ethnographers. There have been also recently works. We could call them as anti-domestication research because it shows other type of domestication processes that usually Western literature has shown. So anti-domestication is something more top-down control type of interaction. It's more about engagement, protection, and so on. So thinking with the Kupunkari, with the Apurina Nation, and also with the Manchineri, and mapping with the Apurina, we did extensive work mapping the ancestral areas where they have been living for a report that was requested to understand to where the territories should be extended. So then it became very evident that there are Sangananis everywhere. Sanganani is the ancient garden and slash and burn fields where today also grow bananas and other plants associated with ancestors' influence in the forest and they transformation. But those places are important in the future lives because people very often return to the same places, if not for cultivation, also they are places of remembering. They are places of informal education, and those anthropogenic patches they really show how ancestors planted and how they fed their little ones. So very often when one is traveling, it's important to stop in those places and share knowledge related to those forests and species. So these kind of actions, they really guide land management and stewardship and the futures, and they form specific forms of engagement and very long-term environmental actions. And our research has shown the nonlinear processes that are based on care, protection, avoidance, and also cultural protocols. This is something that we have seen that it's very important to to practice so-called no-go areas, because there are specific species, or really negotiate with many other life forms how those areas are used, and they are also very important for diverse forms of arts. So the environmental, ecological, traditional knowledge related to the specific places is embedded in different art forms, storing, but also in songs, dances. And as an example, I'd like to mention, for instance, the Moriche palm, Purichi areas in the wetlands. They are known by biologists as species called keystone species, so they are important for other animals, also for humans. But what Apodina stories highlight is how important they are for the cycle of water. So from very land level storing, we can also see that there are really atmospheric levels involved in this very detailed knowledge related to the certain species and ecological places. But yes, as we know from colonization and non-indigenous peoples' impact, the impacts in the environment became very negative and contrary to those diversifying practices of indigenous peoples, because these kind of processes that I described briefly are really diversifying. They have been diversifying forests for a very, very long time. But so in this area, especially from the 60s, somewhat different type of developments and logics of occupation of the area. That's it's very important also to understand that in this region there were also many changes already in pre-colonial time. So indigenous societies have extensively changed during the pre-colonial time, and the occupation of this area starts around 9,000 years ago. And I would like to mention that this area is known for geometric earthworks. I don't know how familiar you are with these monumental landscapes, but the upper and central Porus region, especially, where I have it's been really an honor to have the opportunity to work with archaeologists and biologists and other scholars and indigenous scholars who I have tried to include in the research projects. This area is known for monumental geometric earthwork complexes, also called as geocliffs, but there are other forms as well, such as embanked earthwork structures, and they date back to 3,000 years. And they were still in use until the 14th century. So before the colonization, these structures, these civilizations developed to the other type of traditions. And previous studies have concluded that these were ceremonial centers based on the absence of residential areas. Ceremonial because of the design and the roads, ceremonial roads connecting the sites, and there are really a very big number of these sites, and the number of the sites is increasing constantly with the research. With the lighter technology. But this spatial outline really point to the cardinal directions, constellation, solar and lunar phases. So we can see that the forest environment, human interactions were at the core of establishment of these sites. And this we can call as early urbanism in this part of the the Amazon. So the logic of urbanity is also very different in this area in pre-colonial time. So here are some more pictures. I've been thinking of the social cosmology of today and at that time, and there are similarities to the geometric designs used today in indigenous arts and for knowledge production and so on. So, but I'm not going into those details. You can also, if you're interested, you can see the documentary that we have produced for cultural heritage education, because many people, even in this very area, don't know about the existence of these sites. But sites design is not so far away from the ceremonial settings of indigenous nations today. So this area today is inhabited by many different indigenous nations, and among them the Aborena nation, with whom I have worked for last 20 years. And many ceremonies take place in a very ceremonial setting, as is the design of these places. And the movement is very important part of the ritual. So entering to the sites and leaving from them. But so in the beginning, in 2003, there were about 60 earthwork sites identified, then later 100, then 40, then 400,000, and now much more. So this is really changing the view to the biocultural heritage of the Amazon, and also to the urbanity, understanding Amazonian urbanity and logics behind the urban centers. And my work has pointed to the urbanity in pre-colonial understanding and to the urbanity processes today, or the circular movements to visit the contemporary cities. The contemporary cities are very often established on the previous places of indigenous settlements. They are very strategic points as well. But so there's quite lots of literature on Latin American urban history from Western perspective, but of course there is also important research done by Latin American researchers. But so Latin American urban history mentions Maya, Aztec, the Inca urban systems, and now the Amazonian urbanity is also much more recognized. And so here in this context, it seems that the centers became populated periodically. So there were places where people came at certain moments, but not just for a few days, even for months. And they were places of exchanges, trading, and knowledge exchange. Many Aborena rituals today also take place very similarly, that they really bring together people from different territories, and the knowledges used in those moments are complementary. It's important to bring different people together and also make political decisions. So they are at the same time economic, spiritual, social encounters. And the ceramics that are found in these sites very clearly point to the different animals and plants. We've been also identifying the ceramics together, for instance, with the Manchinary people who do decorate the ceramics very carefully. And even if we are looking at the ceramics that date back to almost 2000 years, for them, the designs have a clear meaning, and they say what they are using them today or what they have heard that in the past they were used. Of course, there have been radical changes. So we don't know what the meanings were 2000 years ago, but it's important to see this cultural continuity. Here, I just would like to mention really that, let's see if this picture moves. So we see here mounds next to the geometric earthwork, and these structures are from different periods. So after the geometric monumental ceremonial sites were constructed and where the residential evidence is really scarce, then start different type of traditions, and there are these circular mounds that are very close to the sites, but they are from different periods. So it's important to understand the changes in pre-colonial time. For a very long time, researchers say that the earthwork building societies collapsed and they disappeared. But it's very important to understand that there are continuities, there are changes from different societies, and there's very dynamic history. But so today, the earthworks, unfortunately, they are destroyed to farm soya, and there's very much ignorance and disinformation about the protection of the sites. So some farmers, they are afraid that if when earthwork is found in the area, they can't anymore practice any agricultural activity in the area. So therefore, we are trying to do this cultural heritage education and try to find ways how to do things in dialogue. But yeah, the environmental history in the Amazon area is challenging, and the scale of the changes has been radical comparing to the previous changes. If we compare to the changes in pre-colonial time, for instance, because at that time the forest was standing until the 60s and the last decades. What's here is a picture from that highway I already mentioned. That so this is how it looks like, and this snowball effects, as you know, fires, rising temperatures, fires that are human caused intentionally and unintentionally. So very, very complex situation. Academic circles, they have recognized the significant levels of biodiversity situated in indigenous territories and indigenous societies' contributions to biodiversity, the stewardship systems and customary institutions, and social cultural connections to the land and waters. This is coming through academic literature, and they have really made impact to the policy circles as well. But despite this growing literature underscoring the conservation importance of indigenous territories, my research group, we noted that there are not so much in-depth analysis of the specific factors and socio-ecological contexts under which indigenous communities are really making this effective work to avoid deforestation. So therefore, we put together geospatial data, and with ethnographic work, community-based work, we wanted to give more context to those geo-referenced information, as there are lots of open data available, and there are lots of studies done in Amazon area. So many images coming every day from the Amazon. And as we've been working with the Apurina people who live in almost 30 territories in different municipal areas, experiencing different pressures, we wanted to see what is happening, what are the differences, where we see that more forest cover is found. And so I would like to tell a little bit about this recent study. We studied 19 demarcated Apurina territories, and Apurina people have been inhabiting this area since the time of immemorial. And they are the most populous, most numerous indigenous nation in this area, and therefore their territories have an important role in this region. So we looked at the different territories in different municipalities. So we have compared 7 different municipalities. There's also one territory, Apurina territory, situated in the neighboring state, but it's beyond the ancestral area. And we wanted to do counterfactual study. So we did study how much the lands have protected the area, and actually what would have happened in the forest cover without indigenous presence and their stewardship. So we looked at the data, how much deforestation the lands have avoided over a 20-year period from 2001 to 2021. And we compared certain pixels taken from the same municipal area, and these were compared. So the municipal average was compared to the Apurina territories, and we did count all different territories separately. So we did compare these two different data sets inside and outside the indigenous territories. And the data came from a global forest change data set, and there were many different variables that we could really see comparable setting. And RISEC, for instance, we used the Amazon network of georeferenced socio-environmental information database. These were the most important ones. But so what did we find out to understand better the situation locally? So we could see it's important to understand the differences in municipalities. And here, when comparing the municipal rates of forest loss, we could clearly see that Boca do Acre, Labrea, and Manacapuru municipalities were leading the forest loss statistics. So Boca do Acre is here next to state capital of Rio Branco. So we are here in Amazonas state in Brazil, and the next state is Acre. And here is the highway that I already mentioned you. So it has really increased deforestation in the area. And there is a Pauni municipality here, the mining, and the Pauni city has been increasing. Here in Labrea, the deforestation has been extending from the highway leading to Porto Velho, and here next to the highway. And Manakapuru, that is situated close to Manaus, also has very high rates of deforestation. So in this situation, what we could see that okay, so I'm explaining a little bit of this image that you are seeing now. So here we have the image number 1 pictures deforestation inside the territories. So here we can see that there is some deforestation in 3 territories, and so the deforestation, of course, in the area that are impacted by the highway, it has clearly impacted those territories, whereas in the others there is almost no deforestation. We also did this image. It's a measurement of deforestation in buffered zone. So we have the 5 kilometers buffer zone where we could see what is happening in the proximity of the territories. And so these very same territories had lost immensely forest cover in their proximities. And the construction of the highway 317 started already in the 50s. But since then, it's been really expanding, and it gives an access to extensive area, and also it has opened, or it has caused the opening of many illegal roads. So really, there's kind of like fishbone forest loss patterns have really opened in the accelerating rate in the area. If we look at the images a bit more closely, I chose here a few municipalities here. So we can see here that the road is really impacting deforestation inside the indigenous territories, in the proximity of the roads. But it's important to understand that here a new access to the most biodiverse areas of the territories is also enabled, because I'm not revealing the most biodiverse and important areas in ecological terms, but I'm just I can tell you from my research collaborators that there are many illegal roads that have been built from the road, and they give access to the most important areas for the people that are also important in cultural terms. They are spiritual places. They are really the source of the arts, knowledge, ecological knowledge. And yeah, maybe I could mention it here, as we have here the map, that for a long time we were thinking why the deforestation expands to this side of Kato Acre. And then now later on, we have understood that this is actually the plan, that this area would be constructed a new state road. Unfortunately, it's not discussed, but this can be found in open source data. And here also I would like to mention that from Kato Acre municipality, there's also new access to the territories in the other municipality in Pauni. So these territories are otherwise accessible by waters from this side. But so now from Kato Acre, there are invasions by illegal loggers in this area. And so so this Pauni, Labrea, in Labrea, the city itself has caused extended urbanization processes that extend to the territories and change the economies in the area. And same here in these territories, because of the increasing number of the illegal roads, it's more difficult to practice biosocial economies, and many people actually they have to look for salarial works, employments, and this is what's happening in these areas. And those bioeconomies are keeping the forest standing. Here, I would like to mention the Lower Poros River area, where we have Tapawa municipality. And as you can see, these have not been connected by bigger roads. And it's important to know that here we have forest, and in these areas, we have the biggest numbers of Apurina language speakers. So these really go together, the language vitality, forest cover, and ecological traditional knowledge that is embedded in language and in forest, in the biological diversity. So there are differences in different municipalities, in a ways also how the Apurina have managed to get their own representatives to the municipal governments. But what is similar? What is similar to these territories? What do they share between themselves? So go to the part where I would like to talk about the governance of the territories. Moment I see the time is running, so I cannot go to the all different details. But so here it's important to understand that the community members, they all participate in monitoring the territory. They bring information about any illegal hunting, fishing, or gathering, resource extraction activities. And the Apurina territories, they continue to have their traditional leadership that is elected by the communities. Besides, there are elders, humanetsi, who participate in the governance structure, as well as different knowledge holders. And today also there are teachers, Apurina teachers, and health assistants, and sanitary assistants who also participate in decision making. But it's important to mention the governance that is inclusive to other species and other life forms. And different plants, animals, especially those with whom the Apurina have been interrelating for a very long time, they are literally called as people, different groups. For instance, Asai people, the Tapir people, and so this kind of ecological knowledge and social relations is really seen in Apurina language, and the different beings, they are also related as kin. They participate in person making. For instance, the Moricha palm, the Puriji palm that I already mentioned is very, very important. And unfortunately, some of the let's say, for instance, Puriji groves areas that are traditionally communicated and interacted with, and that are really protecting the water cycles in the land, might be outside of the demarcated territories. So next to those territories that are situated in the highway areas, where, for instance, one important moricha palm growth, but it got cleared for the farm, and therefore territory that is demarcated now is suffering lack of water. So it's almost absurd that this territory is situated in the Amazon, but there's no water for drinking water for people. But it's really related to that moricha palm area that the farmers, cattle farmers, destroyed next to the territory. I could speak more about plants and their importance in Apurina social relations, but maybe I don't go to the details. I would like to go also to the new projects that we have identified to share that information with you and see if you have some comments. But related to the Apurina governance structure, it's important to mention that Apurina are politically represented, so in modern political terms, and there's also regional indigenous federation. They participate actively in the state, national indigenous movement, and international one. And as I said, municipal politics is important, and how many Apurina people have managed to occupy positions in local FUNAI, Secretary of Education, and so forward. But here it's important to understand the cyclical ecological practice, as I mentioned, and really the non-temporal timeline, the return to the places of ancestors, and how specific, we can call them sacred places, how they are protected and how they connect to the ancestors, and how the detailed ecological knowledge is embedded in language construction, stories, and terminology. The terminology of plants and animals, it's very, very detailed, and link point to the many other species. Really, they point to the contexts, relations of different species with other beings. I've been working together with a group of linguists from UFPA, Federal University of Pará, and our connection of knowledges, language, ethnography, and other types of indigenous knowledges have been very, very useful. And so Apurina leaders have very robustly articulated for the protection of their territories internally, but also in politics, in municipal politics. They work, they have done with the community patrols, reporting illegal logging to the state, and so on. It's really important to highlight, and also their resistance to the mining pressure in this area, for instance, in Tapawa, has been very important movement. And that we can really see how indigenous people's presence is the stronghold of the ecosystem integrity in the area. And you can check that article if you want to look at some numbers. What were the numbers we came to? Like how much Apurina territories have protected the forest compared to the other municipal areas. And in that study, those areas that were impacted by the highway, the number was really impressive. So despite the impacts and all the difficulties to practice biosocial economics, they were very, very effective. But so, yeah, there are some other studies you can read if you are interested in more philosophical, sociocosmological understandings and more understanding the time notions of temporalities of land management. There are many studies that we have already published. But so from this very important work that has been done, political work, not for only the Aboriginal communities, but for the Amazon rainforest and at planetary level, I would like to briefly mention here in the end the new plans, because since the last study that we published, we started to look at more the roads impacts. We actually already came up with some numbers. We did little experimentation. We wanted to study how extensive is the deforestation in satellite images from existing roads. And as existing road, we considered any area that looks like road. So it can be official one or unofficial one. So we look at what is the extension of deforestation from roads. But at that time of the study, we also saw more and more discussion about impact of the extension of this 319 highway. And we started to talk about the road with the communities. So in research projects, there are involved more Aboriginal researchers from the upper Purus area. But when we were discussing with the territories in the area where the roads are being built, it was evident that they had not even been informed about the road projects. And many ecologists and other researchers, there are already many years that they have really raised the concern about the ecological impact of these states' roads, AM 366, if it's being built, because it would really impact in irreversible ways ecological systems. But what is important is that it would pass in the middle of two Aboriginal territories, and also in the proximity of Itishimitari. And these three territories are, I would say, the only ones where the Aboriginal language is still used in everyday, besides Tumia and some other territories in central Purus River, where there is still very important forest cover. But so there is no information offered. There have been some consultations. So of course there should be FPIC, free prior informed consent, practiced. So there have been some meetings, but they have been more or less with leaders of the village leaders, because in one territory there can be different villages, but not that kind of proper consultations as Andre, for instance, highlights. It means that the people are collectively consulted, and the short-term, long-term options are discussed. And as you know, with many other economic projects taking place in the Amazon, indigenous peoples also are involved in those construction processes because they get paid. They might offer source of income. So it's a very sensitive situation when there is no information. And so I mentioned international law, ILO, on-trip, and so on, but also in Brazilian law, there is an interministerial law that mentions that indigenous peoples have to be consulted in the Amazon region if the project takes place in 40 kilometers from the reserve. So this is what is happening here. I could speak more about this, but I also want to mention other project that has not been discussed. If I can move to the next slide. Is it here? Yeah, there's other project taking place, and it has not been discussed. In open access data, we can see that there's a plan for the road, as I mentioned, from Poco to Acre, that would pass many different Apurina territories. And this is not even being discussed. So I think, researchers have tried to do their role and inform political decision makers for a long time, but I think there is still much to study and understand these projects. But so what I want to say that for me it's important to do work together with the community and support in the projects that and in the research projects that they are interested in. So we are working together with the communities to vitalize their language. This is what communities have been asking for a very long time. We've been doing it for quite some time, producing new school materials, for instance, for their local schools, so that people can learn back the Apurina language, and also those who are speaking, so that they can really pass that to the next generations, because that knowledge is important knowledge-wise, but also for people to know their own environment. Because today the schooling system locally as well, it's very rarely offers information about the biocultural local history, and these big projects that have of course myriad connections to different parts of the world. But so this is what we have been doing, and I think it's important to finish with this more positive side, and we've been also doing vitalization of songs as community has requested, and territorial mapping, and this kind of like responses to the emotional parts of the community, that where we can see sadness and fear, and this kind of engagements with the past. It also gives force for the people to not only to do the mobilization, but think their own climate futures locally. And therefore, I would like to finalize with words of Valtrimiro Apurina. It was in 2019. I think he just crystallized so well the stewardship logics that is really about life making. I was at that time asked to contribute to the IPBES report about the wild species, and I was myself thinking of few things, a few species that would be included in the report. And I was having a discussion with Valtrimiro, and I said, "What do you think? Should we include the Purici, a Moriche palm, Mauritia flexuosa, right, by its Latin name, Kinyari, Apurina language?" And he said, "Yes, absolutely, eregari pitkari, let's include it." And then what he says crystallizes for me the Apurina relational ontology. because he said, Apurina cannot live without Kinyari. That's where our dance, our music that we sing comes from. It is where the shamans seek the spirits of songs, from there the blaze of Kinyari. If all the Kinyari thickets are cleared, we also become weak. The Kinyari is our security. It's the chief of spirits, of all other spirits. So we are very worried about the Kinyari disappearing. If we defend her, she defends us. Where the Kinyari thickets have disappeared, so has the water. Where you have Kinyari thicket, there is water all the time. If you don't have them, you don't have water. If you kill all the Kinyari palms, it will be dry there, dry. So in our world, in our land, our security is Kinyari, which brings water and gives water to all other trees. This means there is also no lack of white-lipped peccaries and cord peccaries. Where there are Kinyari thicket, there are peccaries. There is everything. There is food, there is seed, there is everything. The chief of our spirits live among the Kinyari thicket. So our security is the Kinyari. Its fruits are eaten by tapir, white-lipped peccary, cord peccary, totuas, akuti, squirrels, big and jackal birds. So I leave with these words. Thank you so much.
We'll start with a question in the room.
Yeah.
Great presentation. And I want to follow up on what you were starting to talk about near the end regarding law and sort of international law. In the 1988 Constitution, property is referred to as having a social function. And that's actually something that has appeared in other Brazilian constitutions and many constitutions throughout the world. But I'm sort of wondering how that legal overlay, how that legal structure interacts with the internal governance that you've been talking about. In other words, is it to the advantage of these communities that the Constitution now contains that kind of provision, or is it irrelevant to the developments you're talking about? Is there some relationship between the multi-species governance you're talking about and the sort of larger legal structure that certainly would consider property have some relationship with the environment?
Oh, this is very, very good question. So in Constitution, Indigenous people's rights, their collective rights are recognized, their culture and language. So very often these issues related to the Indigenous law, because there is a Western law and Indigenous law, and I'm not only meaning customary law, but like really people's own law and principles. So very often it is treated as culture. So there this culture thing is very often shadowing many other things as well. But as knowledge, epistemologies, these are put in a culture basket. So unfortunately, very often there are two different systems and they very rarely meet. So this would be very important. But so we can, what I've been also examining is how my research collaborators talk about different issues in their own communities and when they have a dialogue with municipal decision makers or at state level. So the language is very different. So the evidence also that is brought to the urban wide offices can be very quantitative, like decrease number of fish. And there is no mentioning of other species because it's strategic as well. And like there's no time to lose to first try to kind of like teach people to think otherwise. So yeah, that's very complex issue. And now what we are also together with Sami scholars, we are aiming at recognition of indigenous law at more international level, because there it's really lacking. Because the Western law and the many conventions are written through Western categories, concepts as culture, nature, and so on. So, but let's hope this will change one day.
Thank you.
I have a question. The Purus, of course, was really impacted by both the Peruvian War with Brazil and by the rubber period, and almost no area escaped it. Do the Purina discuss this, the rubber period particularly?
Absolutely, it's a very important part of their history. It's so
I mean,
yeah, I mean,
slavery,
where to start? Yeah, also, I mean, the presence of states, missionaries, the establishment of different posts, posts in the, I mean, the indigenous or Indian posts at that time where there was schooling for really extensive assimilation, very similar way as we know school histories in Canada or in the North, in the Arctic, the same movement. But so the rubber slavery is part of Imaginary and Aporina histories, and also the way how the areas were occupied and taken to the places of certain rubber patrons, how people had to move to certain areas. Absolutely, the rubber patrons are part of the history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I suppose the one word that stayed with me, if we can emphasize well, is diversity in the Amazon. Some of your case studies, you have scales, and I see sort of 10, 20, 30, 40 kilometers. Just even working with collaborative groups of people, the challenges of doing research are very considerable. I came out of English historical geography, and material landforms, cultural expression of systems is something very powerful for me. In England, we used to sort of wander around doing field work where deserted villages, open field systems were completely overridden by subsequent forms of use of land and organization of land. These earthworks, which I'm not sure the world at large really has quite caught onto the scale of them yet, are an extraordinarily powerful example. Here we are in the 21st century, and the idea of sort of let's just establish soybean fields over cultural patrimony of this kind is rather grim. And as a geographer, I'm always interested in, I have to work on frontier-related stuff, and that word is loaded in many ways, but it's a very important one in terms of how Brazil as a world, as a vast nation, is unfolding. And I suppose I've always been an Atlanticist starting out. And when one thinks about the occupation much of the interior of Brazil, it came from the south towards the north, from the Atlantic to the interior. Susanna's work, among others, on the Amazon made me rethink frontiers, because in that riparian Amazonian world, you've got a very different logic of the occupation of space. But now, in the Southwest Amazon, this oceanic corridor, the Pacific is very much part of the driving dynamic.
Yeah.
So making sense of all of this is extraordinarily challenging. Thank you for giving us some sense of different aspects of the projects that you've been engaged with.
Yeah, and thanks for highlighting the diversity. It's very important. And important to keep all the time in mind the long distance exchanges with the Andes and other parts of the Amazon. In a similar way as North America has been in a close relationship with Central America. Here in this context, these are too little looked at. There's very much this static image of different nations, very place-based, and what the earthworks do highlight is occupation of the same area that is very inter-ethnic, so to say, and not just one area for one indigenous nation and the other area for other. They are really overlapping and coming together. So there's these histories that we can learn today are impossible without the presence of forest. Forest is very key to understand the history of the region. And of course, the indigenous nations whose knowledge that is not necessarily in written form is crucial for understanding the history and the present.
We have a couple of questions from people watching online. First, our recent sociology PhD, Gabriel Sosnowski, who is on a postdoc in Georgetown now, asked how does the Mura people figure in the history between the Apurina and encroaching colonial projects?
Oh, very good. Very good question. So there are many other indigenous nations in the area. Some of them live in voluntary isolation. Some are so-called recent contact. Some indigenous nations, I'm just giving an example from the Manchineri area. So Manchineri people actually, they protect part of their territory for the Mashkopiro people. So even if they are not in contact, they leave a part of their territory for those kin, as they say, kin who live in voluntary isolation, untouched from Machineri's own activities. There's not so, Apurina don't really vocally talk about Mura people and all oral histories that I have learned. There is not mentioning of the Mura people. There's more, for instance, mentioning of the Kasharari people, and their role is important as a co-traveler from the place of origin. But there are many other indigenous nations locally as well. And not all of them are mentioned in the history, even if there might be other, quite as political alliance importance with that. So unfortunately, my question is not more elaborated related to the Mura people.
And we have another question from a current PhD student, working with Susana Noelle Guzman, who has asked, during my fieldwork in Bolivia, also in the southern portion of the Amazon, I've encountered extensive narratives similar to that of the multi-species governance you mentioned in your presentation in many different forms. And I wanted to ask if you have any particular book and or article recommendations on this topic.
Oh, there are so many multi-species studies have grown recently. There are many books related to the multi-species justice. Just a new book came out about multi-species justice. What we are currently doing is to go actually beyond the multi-species studies, because multi-species studies very often they are limited to the species thinking, even if there is kind of like almost thinking of inhabiting the same places and highlighting the interactions. We are trying to think of what are beings in these relational ontologies, and in this thinking there are no kind of like individual entities, but they are always, even as beings, they are existing in relations to the others. And indigenous languages are very important in highlighting new or creating new theorizing for Western world. But there are many works. Sophie Chow, for instance, I could give one reference if you'd like to have one.
You'll see her at dinner,
Okay,
so we can exchange.
yeah, we can continue the exchange.
Right, well, I don't have any more Zoom questions, and we have no more room questions. Do you have any final words, or is that it?
Yes, I would like to thank everyone, and let's keep our knowledge exchange in the future. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a delight to hear this, and also, although of course heartbreaking simultaneously. So, but especially with that macro thing going on too, we haven't really talked about that. But this is a major transformative energy that's moving into this region. So